Okay, confession time. I used to be proud of how much I could cram into a single day. I wore productivity like a badge of honor. Color-coded calendars, back-to-back commitments, and just enough margin to squeeze in the important stuff. But last fall, in the middle of a 16-hour workday, my husband asked if we could touch base. He was traveling for work and we hadn't seen each other in several days. So I looked at my schedule and told him, yeah, I have a 14-minute window between 12:01 and 12:14 p.m. Can you call me while I'm driving? That moment hit me hard. I was racing between obligations, just trying to hold it all together. And somehow I'd reduced time with the person I love most to a tiny sliver wedged between destinations. I wasn't just busy, I was hurried, and it was costing me more than I wanted to admit. In today's world, it feels like we're always running, rushing from one thing to the next, trying to keep up with everything and everyone. Burnout is a common story, and many of us are left spiritually dry, disconnected, and overwhelmed. The pace we've adopted is simply unsustainable, and it's costing us more than we realize. In The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, John Mark Comer helps us see just how detrimental this hustle culture can be and offers a better way forward. If we haven't met yet, hi, I'm Shannon, your Barefoot librarian. After years of diving into research, earning a master's degree in holistic education, and spending my career as a librarian, teacher, and lifelong learner, I've read a lot of books. And let's be honest, many of them have a lot of fluff. But when I find a book that truly delivers, I'm here to break it down for you. No fluff, just the practical, research-backed insights that actually make a difference. In this post, we'll dive into the 3 parts of the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. First, we'll diagnose the problem of hurry and how it's affecting our lives. Then we'll explore how the unhurried life of Jesus offers a solution. And finally, we'll look at 4 practical practices that can help us slow down, find rest, and restore balance to our lives. So kick off your shoes, grab a cup of tea or something warm, and let's get started. Part 1, the problem. Have you ever stopped to think about the times you felt most disconnected from God? I know I've experienced those moments of spiritual dryness, and this book forced me to ask some tough questions. Am I simply too busy? Too hurried to pay attention to the one who's always there? It's easy to assume that God is the one who feels far away. But what if he's not the one who's absent? What if he's just patiently waiting for me to slow down, to stop rushing around, and actually focus on him? That's something I'm currently reflecting on for myself. There's a story in scripture that gets me every time. It's in 1 Kings 19, right after this huge, dramatic moment where the prophet Elijah calls down actual fire from heaven in front of everyone. He's just had this massive spiritual victory, a total mountaintop moment. But right after that, he crashes hard. Queen Jezebel threatens to kill him, and Elijah panics. He runs for his life, straight into the wilderness. He's exhausted, overwhelmed, and honestly, kind of done with everything. He sits under a tree and asks God to let him die. That's how low he is. Now, I've never had a literal showdown with prophets on a mountain, but I have had those moments where I'm just emotionally wrung out. You give everything you have, physically, mentally, spiritually, and suddenly you're spent. You're not thinking clearly. You're tired, scared, and questioning everything. Elijah was feeling all of that. And what does God do in response? Does he lecture Elijah or tell him to push through? Nope. God sends an angel with snacks. Seriously, the angel wakes Elijah up and says, "Get up and eat." So he does. Then he lies back down and takes some more rest. The angel comes back again with more food and says, "The journey is too much for you." In other words, you need to rest and recharge. I love that. God's first response to Elijah's breakdown wasn't a pep talk. It was practical care. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do when you're overwhelmed is to stop, rest, and refuel. After that, Elijah travels to Mount Horeb and hides out in a cave. He's still feeling lost and afraid. That's when God tells him to go out and stand on the mountain because he's about to pass by. And this next part, it's stayed with me for years. There's this powerful wind that tears through the mountains, but God's not in the wind. Then there's a huge earthquake, but God's not in the earthquake either. After that, a fire. But again, no sign of God in the fire. And finally, there's a gentle whisper. And that's where God is. That scene gets me every time because if I'm being honest, I often expect God to show up in big dramatic ways. I want a lightning bolt, a clear sign, some kind of bold answer. But more often than not, God speaks in the stillness, in the quiet, in the whisper. And that's where it hits home for me. Because I can live so fast and loud that I miss it entirely. I fill my days with noise and movement thinking I need to do more, be more, keep going. But throughout Scripture, God consistently invites us to slow down and rest in Him. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." In Matthew 11:28, Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." That's not a productivity tip, it's a gentle invitation. Slow down, be still. God isn't far away, He's right here speaking in the quiet. We just have to make space to listen. It's a hard truth, but one that John Mark Comer makes crystal clear. Hurry isn't just tiring, it's spiritually dangerous. It distracts us, wears us down, and keeps us from contentment and life-giving connection with both God and others. One part of the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis really sticks with me. If you haven't read it, it's a fictional set of letters from an older demon named Screwtape to his nephew Wormwood, teaching him how to derail a human's spiritual life. What hit me wasn't some big dramatic scheme, it was the simplicity of the strategy. Distraction. Screwtape tells Wormwood to keep his patient busy with a multitude of trifles. Not outright sin, just constant noise. Just enough clutter to keep him from ever truly noticing what matters. Lewis writes, "The safest road to hell is the gradual one, the gentle slope. Soft underfoot, without sudden turnings, without milestones, without signposts." That line gives me chills, because the truth is, distraction doesn't feel dangerous. It feels normal, comfortable, but it quietly pulls us away from God. And I know when I'm constantly checking my phone, racing through my to-do list, or numbing out with background noise, I miss the very thing my soul is actually craving. And I think that's why I relate to it so much, because I know what it's like to be distracted more than just trifles. I've fallen into that trap more times than I'd like to admit, chasing the next big milestone, thinking that's when I'll finally be able to slow down and feel content. But the target always moves. When I graduate, when I get married, when we buy the house, when we pay it off, when I get that promotion. I keep telling myself peace is just around the corner. But in always looking ahead, I end up missing what's right in front of me. The beautiful life God has given me right now. It's not just distraction. It's our shrinking ability to even pay attention. In the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, John Mark Comer shares a statistic that really stopped me in my tracks. Our attention span has dropped to just 8 seconds. Shorter than a goldfish's, which clocks in at 9. Now, naturally, I was curious about this claim, so I did a little bit of digging. The statistic comes from a 2015 study by Microsoft Canada. However, there's a slight issue. This study has not been peer-reviewed, and it lacks the scientific rigor needed to fully back such a broad claim. And I have to admit, I was a little disappointed that Comer didn't dig deeper before quoting that. Still, despite the study's shortcomings, Comer's point holds water. With constant notifications, endless to-do lists, and the pressure to always be on, it's no wonder that slowing down feels like a foreign concept. This non-stop rush isn't just eroding our peace, it's sabotaging the connections that matter most. So, where did all of this hurry come from? Comer takes us back through history to show that this frantic pace didn't happen overnight. It's been building for centuries. Even the Roman playwright Plautus back in 2nd century BC was frustrated by time pressure. He wrote,
"The gods confound the man who first found out how to distinguish the hours. Confound him too who in this place set up a sundial to cut and hack my days so wretchedly into small pieces."
Can you believe that? Even then, people were feeling the weight of time, wishing their days weren't sliced into measured chunks. Plautus didn't want his day divided up. He just wanted to live it. And honestly, same. Comer traces how this hurry culture has evolved, and it's pretty eye-opening. The pressure to race against time has only grown stronger over the centuries. Things accelerated during the Industrial Revolution. Before that, life moved at the pace of the sun and the seasons. Planting and harvest, sunrise and sunset, work and Sabbath. But factories introduced shift work, punch clocks, and the worship of efficiency. Time became muddy, and suddenly people were no longer living by rhythms, they were ruled by schedules. Then came the technological revolution, and everything exploded. We didn't just measure time, we started carrying it in our pockets. Work stopped being a place and became a constant companion. Now we scroll, ping, refresh, and check email at all hours. The lines between rest and work are gone, and it's taking a toll. Comer says that one of the most dangerous outcomes of this tech-driven culture is how it's made true rest feel impossible. Even our so-called downtime is filled with stimulation. We're not restoring our souls, we're numbing them. Our devices promise connection and convenience, but they often leave us feeling more isolated and anxious than ever. Studies show that loneliness and anxiety are at shocking highs, with a 2022 report finding that nearly 37% of older adults in the US feel socially isolated. And mental health issues like depression are closely linked to a lack of social support. It's a troubling trend, with more and more people feeling disconnected from others. And again, this is where it gets personal. I've noticed that the times I feel most spiritually empty aren't when I'm struggling or suffering, they're when I'm rushing. My schedule is packed, notifications never stop, and I can't remember the last time I was still long enough to hear God's whisper. What if God isn't absent in these moments? What if I'm the one who's absent, so caught up in my own busyness that I miss his quiet, steady presence? Part 2, the solution, the way of Jesus. I love the way Comer explores the Gospels as biographies, not commandments. For a long time, I saw the Bible as either a giant rule book or a collection of fun stories, talking animals, boat building heroes, fire from the sky. For ages, it didn't click with me that the Gospels, the accounts of Jesus' life, are actually biographies. And I love a good biography. Whether I'm trying to learn someone's habits or avoid a grave mistake they made, I read biographies to figure out how someone lived and what I can take away from their story. Usually, we pick up a biography because we admire someone and we want to become a little more like them. So, why don't we read the Gospels that way? They're not just a list of do's and don'ts or snapshots of miracles. They're an honest human look at how Jesus actually lived. And if he promises us peace, not just someday, but here and now, then maybe the key isn't just in believing his words, but in copying his rhythm. Jesus wasn't in a hurry. He had margin. He was fully present. And the more I pay attention to how he lived, the more I realize this isn't just good theology. It's a better way to be human. Jesus was never in a hurry. It's striking when you look at how he lived. He was always on the move, always surrounded by crowds, but he was never rushed. Take, for example, the story of Jairus, a synagogue leader who was desperately trying to get Jesus to heal his daughter. She was dying, and Jairus had faith that Jesus could save her. Mark 5:21-24. As Jesus was on his way to Jairus' house, the crowds pressed in on him from all sides. But then, something unexpected happened. A woman who had been suffering from a bleeding disorder for 12 long years approached him. She had spent everything she had on doctors, but no one could heal her. Desperate, she believed that if she could just touch the edge of his robe, she would be healed. And she was right. When she touched him, Jesus immediately felt power go out of him, and he stopped in his tracks. In the middle of the crowd, people pressing on every side, he paused and asked, "Who touched me?" The disciples were like,
Jesus, everyone is touching you."
But he was looking for more than just a physical touch. He wanted to acknowledge the woman's faith, to restore her not just physically, but spiritually. He could have kept walking, kept rushing toward his destination on an emergency errand, but he didn't. He was interruptible. He had time to stop and notice her. Now, remember, Jairus was with Jesus the whole time, waiting anxiously for Jesus to hurry to his house where his daughter was on the brink of death. But Jesus, despite the urgency, remained unhurried. He took the time to connect with the woman, to restore her and remind her that her faith had healed her. As Jesus was still speaking with the woman, a messenger arrived from Jairus' house with devastating news. "Your daughter is dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore." Oh my gosh, I just got chills. I love this story so much. In that moment, everything must have felt like it was slipping away for Jairus. But Jesus wasn't in a panic. He turned to Jairus and said, "Don't be afraid, just believe." Even in the face of a tragedy, Jesus didn't rush. He stayed calm and continued to move at his own pace, teaching Jairus a powerful lesson in trust in timing. When they arrived at Jairus' house, Jesus took the girl by the hand and said, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." And she did. Jesus didn't rush, but he knew exactly when to act. These stories of the bleeding woman and Jairus' daughter show us something profound. Jesus lived with interruptions, and there were real emergencies. But he didn't let the urgency of the moment dictate his pace. He didn't rush, he was unhurried, yet always present. We can learn a lot from his example. Life is full of urgent situations, but Jesus shows us that we don't have to be swept away by the rush. Now, there are definitely times where we do need to be expedient, but in general, there are not life or death emergencies every day, unless you're like working in the ER or something, but that's not what I'm talking about. Jesus shows us that in our everyday lives, we don't have to be swept away by the rush. We can be busy yet unhurried, present and peaceful, even in the middle of chaos. If I'm honest, I still have no idea how to live like this most days. I get caught up in the rush, the pressure to move faster, to get more done. But I'm excited to continue learning how to walk at Jesus' pace, to embrace the peace he offers. I know I'll never get it perfect, but I hope that little by little, I start to look more like my King, unhurried, present, and full of peace. Understanding the Greek of easy yoke. Okay, bear with me for just a second while we dive into some nerdy Greek stuff. In Matthew 11:28-30, Jesus invites us to take on his yoke, saying it's easy and light. Now, when we think of a yoke, we're usually thinking of that heavy wooden contraption used to pair two oxen to plow a field or haul a load. So easy doesn't exactly come to mind. A yoke is made for hard work, right? So what gives? What does it mean that Jesus' yoke is easy? The key lies in the Greek word Christos, which is often translated as kind, gentle, or good. It's not about ease in the sense of lack of effort. Rather, it describes something that is manageable, beneficial, and not harsh. Jesus isn't saying that life will be without work or effort. He's saying that his yoke, while still a work tool, is different from the oppressive yokes of the world. His yoke doesn't crush us. It helps us work in harmony with him and others. In the context of the time, a yoke was not just a physical tool for oxen. It also symbolized a rabbi's teachings, which was new to me when I read this book. Every rabbi had a yoke, their interpretation of God's laws, their way of living out the commandments. These yokes could often feel burdensome and demanding, filled with religious rules and obligations. But Jesus' yoke is different. His yoke is easy in the sense that it invites us into a way of life that is kind, gracious, and sustainable. It's not about doing more, but about doing it with him. We're not yoked alone. Jesus is with us, walking alongside us, sharing the burden. The beauty of this yoke is that it allows us to work without the strain of constant striving. It's like having a partner who carries the weight with you, making the load feel lighter. Instead of being weighed down by rigid rules or endless demands, we're invited to walk at Jesus' pace with his strength, his presence, and his rest. So, while the yoke may still require effort and work, it's no longer about working in isolation or under harsh conditions. It's a yoke of grace, one that leads us to a life of peace, rhythm, and joy even in the midst of hard work. Jesus' yoke doesn't take away the responsibility of life, it transforms it. Before we wrap up part 2, there's one more Greek word we need to chat about. In the Gospels, the term desert place comes from the Greek word eremos, which doesn't just refer to a barren, lifeless desert like we might imagine. Instead, it means a secluded, solitary place, a quiet space for reflection and rest. Jesus frequently withdrew to these desert places to pray and reconnect with God. This wasn't about isolating himself. It was about intentionally stepping away from the noise and busyness of the world to recharge, center his thoughts, and realign with his Father. This desert place wasn't empty. It was full of presence and purpose. It's not about running away from life, but about creating space to be restored and refocused. We see examples of this in the Gospels. In Luke 4:42, we read, "At daybreak, Jesus went out to a solitary place." Here, Jesus retreats from the crowd to find a quiet moment to reconnect. In Mark 1:35, it says, "Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed." Jesus took time alone before the day got hectic. Prioritizing solitude is the key to his strength. And in Matthew 14:13, we read, "When Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place." Even in moments of grief or distress, he sought solitude to process and find peace. We often think of solitude as something to avoid, perhaps because we associate it with loneliness or discomfort. But for Jesus, solitude was an essential practice, not a weakness. It was a way to recharge, refocus, and return to his mission with renewed strength. Solitude is a gift. It's not about escaping from the world, but about creating space to connect with God and ourselves on a deeper level. It allows us to tune out the noise that often drowns out the still, small voice of God. And it's in these quiet moments that we find the peace and clarity we need to move forward. Jesus' regular rhythm of retreating to these desert places wasn't just for his own well-being. It was a powerful model for us. Solitude doesn't mean running away from life. It's about intentionally carving out time for reflection and renewal. All right, now that we've explored the importance of solitude and the peace rhythms Jesus modeled for us, it's time to move from theory to practice. And the next section, we'll dive into 4 powerful practices that will help us eliminate hurry from our lives and embrace a more peaceful, intentional pace. Part 3, 4 practices to unhurry your life. Okay, now we're getting to the good stuff. These next 4 practices aren't magic, but they've seriously helped me shift from survival mode to soul studying peace. First up, silence and solitude, which sounds lovely and impossible some days. Let's talk about it. We don't need to be in a literal desert to find this space. It's about carving out intentional time away from the noise, whether in a physical place or simply a mental and emotional retreat. When I was in Nepal researching indigenous people groups, I learned firsthand how important it is to find solitude. The days were packed with fieldwork, long hours of travel, interviews, and constant interactions with the team and villagers. It was an endless buzz of activity, and I quickly realized there was no time to just breathe. But I discovered a small window of peace in the early mornings before everyone else was awake. I started getting up at 4 a.m. just so I could have those few precious moments of stillness. It wasn't easy and it meant sacrificing sleep, but those quiet moments alone were what kept me grounded. They gave me the space to reflect, pray, and recharge for the long days ahead. If Jesus needed solitude to stay grounded, there's no shame in admitting that we do too. Our spiritual lives thrive when we take time to pause, pray, and listen. The world around us is constantly demanding our attention, but the rhythm of retreating into solitude is essential for our souls to breathe. I'm still learning how to make this a regular practice, but it's been a game changer. Whether it's waking up early, finding a quiet corner, or even just driving home with no distractions, no audiobooks, podcast, or radio, those moments of solitude are like a breath of fresh air in a busy world. They don't solve everything, but they help us reconnect with what matters most. And that's something we all need in the midst of our busy lives. Sabbath, more than just a day off. As I've learned from the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry and from the scriptures, Sabbath isn't just a nice idea, it's a command and a gift from God. It's meant to be a time for rest and renewal, but honestly, it's something I've struggled to fully embrace and still struggle to fully embrace. I'll be vulnerable with you. For much of the last year, I was working 7 days a week with long hours. Sometimes I'd go months without a single day off, thinking that I could just push through. So apparently the camera cut off, and I did not realize that until I was going through editing it, and it's not finished. So for all 2 of you that are watching still, we're just gonna finish it now. If you've seen some of my earlier videos, you'll know that did not work out too well for me. The pace caught up with me, and I realized how unsustainable it was. But even though I don't yet have the perfect rhythm for Sabbath in my own life, I know that the invitation is still there. It's not about following a rule, it's about accepting a gift. In the Old Testament, God gave the Israelites the command to rest every Sabbath day, and even commanded the land to rest 1 year out of every 7. Why? To remind them that they were no longer slaves in Egypt, bound to relentless work without respite. God was offering them freedom to rest, to trust in His provision, and to acknowledge that we don't have to keep striving for everything. Even God Himself rested after creation, Genesis 2:2-3. God didn't need rest, but He set a rhythm for us to follow, showing us that rest is a crucial part of His design. Jesus even practiced rest and withdrew often to spend time with His Father. There's also something really interesting that John Mark Comer shares about the Seventh-day Adventists in his book. They're known for their strict observance of the Sabbath, and studies show that they have some of the longest lifespans and healthiest lives in the world. That's a testament to the physical, mental, and spiritual power of the Sabbath. So while I may not be living it out perfectly right now, I'm learning. The Sabbath is a beautiful reminder that we are not defined by our work or productivity. It's about finding that balance between work and rest. And when we honor this rhythm, it refreshes us. It's resistance to the hustle culture that tries to tell us we have to keep pushing. And it's an invitation to delight in God's provision and care. Simplicity. Less is more. This is one area where I actually feel pretty solid. My husband and I are both minimalists. Not in a cold, stark, everything white and empty kind of way, but in a cozy, intentional, life-giving kind of way. We've learned that owning less helps us live more. We don't keep what we don't use. We pause before buying new things. We value quality over quantity and white space over clutter. Simplicity has brought so much peace to our home and minds. One day, we'd actually love to do some version of nomadic living, travel light, live simply, and experience the world without being tied down to stuff or square footage. That dream definitely fuels our mindset now. But that said, the calendar is still my weakness. I can be really disciplined about stuff, but when it comes to time, I'm a work in progress. My schedule tends to get a little too full, and margin sometimes goes right out the window. So while simplicity in things comes naturally to me, simplicity in how I spend my time still takes quite a bit of effort. John Mark Comer talks about simplicity as more than just a lifestyle. It's a spiritual practice. It's about choosing margin, resisting hurry, and making space for what matters most. And I've seen just how powerful that can be, even when you're still growing in parts of it. Slowing, a gentle rebellion. Slowing down doesn't always feel natural. In a world that glorifies fast and efficient, slowing is a quiet act of rebellion. It can feel really weird at first. John Mark Comer gives some genius little ideas to practice this. Drive the speed limit. Choose the longest checkout line on purpose. Show up 10 minutes early without filling the time with a scroll. At first glance, they almost sound silly, but when you try them, they're surprisingly powerful. Slowing feels awkward at first because we're so conditioned to rush, but over time it starts to feel like breathing again. It's like taking off a pair of shoes that never really fit and realizing how good it feels to just walk barefoot. When I actively choose to slow down, even in small ways, it quiets my mind. I'm more present, I listen better, I actually notice the world around me instead of racing past it. My soul stops sprinting. I remember that I'm human, not a machine. If you want to start experimenting in this area, here are 10 small ways you can practice slowing down today. Like I said, drive the speed limit. Yep, even in the slow lane. Pick the longest checkout line and don't touch your phone while you wait. Eat a meal without multitasking. No screens, no scrolling, just eating. Go for a walk without headphones, or better yet, leave your phone at home altogether. I know I'm not modeling that very well right now, but it's still a good one. Sit in silence for 5 minutes before starting your day. Say no to something you don't have to do this week. Read a physical book instead of a screen. Also, I did not model that very well with this specific book. Let someone go ahead of you in line or on the road. Do just one thing at a time, on purpose. Schedule in buffer time. Leave margin between your commitments. Slowing down won't happen by accident, but when you choose it, even in tiny ways, it begins to reshape your life from the inside out. So what could a quiet life look like? What if we really did it? What if we stopped racing, striving, juggling a million things, and actually lived unhurried? Comer paints this beautiful picture of a quiet life at the end of the book, and I couldn't help but laugh because I already live in the woods. Like, actual woods. No traffic, no cell service, spotty Wi-Fi, and woodland creatures for neighbors. You'd think I'd have this whole unhurried lifestyle down by now, but hurry isn't a location, it's a heart posture. And if I've learned anything, it's that peace takes intention. It doesn't just show up, you have to clear space for it, one barefoot step at a time. So here's your barefoot challenge. Just try one small thing this week. Think of it like dipping your toes in a cool stream. It's refreshing, simple, and it might wake something up in you. Maybe it's a few minutes of silence before the house wakes up, a walk without your phone, or letting someone go ahead of you in line at the market. And as always, the book's linked below if you want to dive deeper. I'm cheering you on from my quiet little corner of the woods. Let's keep walking this path, unhurried, intentional, and barefoot as we go. That's all for now. Take care, stay curious, and I'll see you next time.